Alrighty, we're going to get started. First, we're going to have our Sergeant at Arms here, Dr. Robert Marks. Yep. He's going to introduce everyone, and then I will start with the rest of the question and answer session.
Thank you. Welcome. Glad to see that you're here. My name is Robert Marks. I'm a professor of electrical and computer engineering here at Baylor, and I'm happy I'm at Baylor because Baylor is one of the few places of higher learning in the United States now where you could have a meeting like this. And we're so honored to be at Baylor where this sort of thing can be discussed. So welcome, and we're going to be able to discuss some very important things. Hopefully, some of you here have some very hard questions. That makes things very interesting. So please, ask your hard questions, but keep it civil. Let me introduce the panels to you. First, on the left, we have Deborah McGregor. She has been the director of CareNet Pregnancy Center of Central Texas since 2006. CareNet assists women facing difficult pregnancies by providing pre, during, and postnatal care. The organization helps over 3,000 women in Central Texas every year. Thanks to Deborah McGregor's work, CareNet was recognized as a charity champion by in 2015 by the First National Bank. She has a doctorate of jurisprudence from South Texas Law of College and was an attorney for 6 years with Zimmerman, and McGregor. Please join me in welcoming Deborah McGregor. Sitting next to Deborah is Anya Fitzgerald, who graduated from the University College in Dublin in 1995. When you talk to her, see if you can detect her accent. She had a degree in chemical engineering, and she worked for British Petroleum in different continents around the world, both off and onshore. She was especially involved with promoting women in engineering until she left the oil business in 2008 in order to attend graduate school in theology at the Mexican-American Catholic College in San Antonio. She graduated in 2012 with an MA in pastoral ministry with specialization in marriage, youth, and family studies. She tutors students in math and science and volunteers as the local campaign director for 40 Days for Life. That is an international prayer campaign that maintains a peaceful, prayerful presence outside of abortion facilities. Please join me in welcoming Anya. Next to Anya is Father Robert Verrill. He's an English Dominican friar who's ordained to the priesthood at Blackfriars, Oxford in 2012. He is currently in the doctoral program in philosophy right here at Baylor. He has an MA in philosophy from Berkeley and a PhD, this is cool for us nerds, in mathematics from Cambridge. He has written on the medieval understanding of human conception as well as on how the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception helps recognize the personhood of every human embryo. Father Robert also plays the trumpet, a skill that proved useful when he was recently asked to blow the shofar. Is that how you say that? Shofar. Shofar, as he led the 40 Days for Life Jericho March around Planned Parenthood. So he marched around and blew the trumpet. So please join me in welcoming Father Robert. What's that? And the building shut down, I'm informed. So that trumpeting does work. Alexander Pruss grew up in Poland and Canada. He has a PhD in mathematics and a PhD in philosophy. He has taught at Georgetown University, but for the last 10 years, he has been at Baylor's philosophy department. He has published several books in philosophy, including One Body, an essay in Christian sexual ethics, and his latest book, which I'm actually reading right now, is called Infinity, Causation, and Paradox, published by Oxford University Press. Please help me in welcoming Alexander, Dr. Pruss. Your Master of Ceremonies tonight is a captain in the United States Air Force. That's Eric Holloway. Eric recently earned his PhD in electrical and computer engineering here at Baylor. So he's now, I think, Captain Doctor.
Captain Doctor.
And
hopefully someday a major doctor.
yes, if he gets a promotion, he will be known as a major doctor. Dr. Holloway will serve as tonight's Master of Ceremonies. Dr. Holloway.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Marks. Yeah, give a hand to Dr. Marks. That was very well done. All right, sponsoring our event tonight, we have 4 different student organizations. We have Oso Logos in the back there. They're on-campus apologetics program, and they have really awesome meetings. So check them out by all means. And they'll challenge you too. So if you want a bit of a challenge, go up and talk with them. And my organization, the American Scientific Affiliation, we are focused on showing that science and religion do not conflict. Because often in popular culture, you're told that they're opposed to each other, but we show the facts that they are not. The other group is Bears for Life. They're the on-campus pro-life group, and we have some representatives back here. And finally, we have the Catholic Student Center, and our main representative is Father Robert Verrill up in front here. Okay, so why did we arrange this conference? Well, both pro-life and pro-choice sides agree on something very important, and that is abortion is a tragic decision. I've talked to many people who claim to be pro-choice, and almost none of them say, oh, yay, great, abortion is an awesome thing. Just about everyone says it does have to happen, but it's a really bad thing. At the point of conception, events are set in motion that will inevitably produce a person just like you or I, unless they are untimely ended. And some reports say that a third of our generation has been eliminated by abortion. So a good portion of that back row is empty because of abortion. To help people avoid the tragedy of abortion, we have put together this panel to consider the value of human life, so we can think through these issues and available options before anyone is placed in a very tough situation and a decision is forced upon them. We want to get them way before they decide to walk into the abortion facility. So a couple preliminaries. So we welcome all questions, but we ask that questions be succinct. You'll be surprised at how quickly time goes. So ask your question once, we'll answer it, and you have one opportunity to ask a follow-up question, but we don't want to have a lot of back and forth. With the people answering the questions, I ask that we just have one person answer first to, I guess, slam the desk or something like that. Shows that you want to answer it. Because also with the answers, you'll be surprised at how fast time goes. We want to keep things moving along. If you don't want to come up and ask a question, but you do have a question, you'll see in front of you there's a sheet of paper where you can write down your email address, and on the back you can write your question. So you can either hand those to our Sergeant of Arms here, and he'll give them to me and I'll read them at the end, or if we have a lull in questions. And we also guarantee that if you have your email address on that sheet, even if it doesn't get answered during the session, one of the panelists will follow up with you with an answer. Also, the questions, I would like to have them focused on the core principles of pro-life. Does human life have value inside the womb that's equal to outside the womb? There are lots of other social issues surrounding the pro-life issue, which become a lot clearer once we get these preliminaries figured out. So I would ask that we try and focus at least the initial questions on the core principles of pro-life. I'm also obliged to say that the opinions expressed tonight do not necessarily represent the views of and has not been reviewed or approved by Baylor University. But if Baylor did review tonight's comments, I suspect they would give enthusiastic endorsement. And to begin this session, we will have Ms. McGregor go over what CareNet provides for women in the Central Texas area.
Hi. Well, CareNet is a crisis pregnancy center. We have been in existence since 1984. We've had several different names, but essentially what we do is we offer services for women who think they might be pregnant. So that includes pregnancy testing, crisis counseling, options counseling. If she does have a positive pregnancy test, then we do an ultrasound to determine viability. A lot of times women who come to us are considering abortion. And so we talk to her about the risk and procedures involved in that. And then if she decides to have an abortion, we provide post-abortion counseling for her. If she comes back to us and is dealing with that. And then also for women who choose life, we have a support center. And at that support center, we have classes we have about 1,000 women a year come through that center. We do pregnancy classes. We have social workers who meet with them one-on-one to do kind of coaching to help them meet goals. Because usually what we found is a crisis pregnancy, a woman's not considering abortion because she wants an abortion. She's considering abortion because there's something in her life that she feels like that she can't get past. So we try to address what those barriers are that makes her think she might not be able to continue a pregnancy. So throughout the pregnancy, we give material assistance to her, help her get ready for the baby. And then for women who would otherwise lose their housing, if they decide to continue a pregnancy, for example, if you have this baby, I'm going to kick you out, then we have a home. We have a 14,000 square foot facility where we have 7 guest rooms and can house 28 women and children at a time. And we have a dog. So.
Thank you very much, Ms. McGregor. All right, to start things off, I'll give us a couple questions, and then from there, we'll do the normal question and answer session. And I am the human mic stand. You come up to me, and I'll let you speak into the mic and ask your question. All right, so to start things off, and this is first person to hit the desk, you get to answer this question. Does human life begin at conception or at some later point of development, and why? All right, Dr. Pruss, you.
Okay, can we put up a slide? I'm going to start by answering a different question about elephant life. So here's what happens, right? You have a cow elephant and a bull elephant, and they mate. And the bull elephant contributes sperm, and the cow elephant contributes an ovum. When things go well from the point of view of the species, the sperm meets the ovum, and the DNA mixes and produces a new cell that is genetically different from the bull elephant and the cow elephant. This cell then starts dividing fairly rapidly, and dividing, and while it's doing that, it's floating about in the reproductive system of the cow elephant until about a month and a half later, it implants in the uterine wall and then continues growing through a number of stages, right? So we can see here, this is like almost the whole of the gestation. The poor elephant, cow elephants, they have to do this for 21 months. It's an extremely long gestational period. Now, sometimes you hear people say it's a mystery when human life begins. Now, if we look at these pictures, it doesn't seem like it's a big mystery what species these are all members of. Now, here, they're very small, so it's hard to see. But what we can do is, so this one here, we can already see this is an elephant. Here it becomes less clear. Eventually you get to something that's more round, like a cell or several cells. But genetically, these are all the same organism that is just getting bigger and bigger, and it's growing more and more structured. So it seems like there's no biological mystery as to when elephant life begins. It begins when the sperm meets the egg, and then you have a new organism that eventually grows a trunk and all the cool elephant stuff. Now, elephants are placental mammals. There are lots of placental mammals in this room as well. All human beings are placental mammals as well. And our reproductive setup is very similar to the elephant, though not as slow. So whereas in the elephant it takes about a month and a half for implantation to happen after the sperm meets the egg, in humans it takes about 2 weeks. Pregnancy takes about 9 months instead of 21 months. But the biological setup is basically the same. And so just as there's really no biological mystery when elephant life begins, there really isn't a biological mystery as to when human life begins. It begins when the sperm and the egg join. Now, you can ask sort of subtle philosophical questions to exactly which hour, just how interspersed does the DNA have to be? But those questions are really irrelevant to the moral questions of abortion, because abortion only happens once pregnancy is detected, and that's at least 2 weeks after fertilization happens anyway. So any sort of subtle philosophical controversies to the exact moment are just irrelevant to the question of abortion. And most philosophers, almost all philosophers will agree that at least 2 weeks after fertilization, which is roughly the earliest point when pregnancy can be detected, you have a new human organism, a new mammal of the species Homo sapiens. And this is not controversial. It's not controversial in biology. It's not controversial in philosophy. It's not controversial in ethics. What is controversial is a different question, which philosophers ask: is this human being a person? So pro-choice philosophers tend to say not all human beings are persons. You can have members of our species, very small members of our species, who are not persons, and who therefore do not have the rights of persons. But if we think that all human beings are people, then the question is not that hard. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Pruss. I'd like to do one quick follow-up question to that. You say most abortions happen after pregnancy is detected at 2 weeks. But if you are also saying that it all begins at the point of the egg being fertilized, and one of the ways that contraceptives and Plan B work is to prevent implantation, my second follow-up question to the panel would be, does that count as abortion as well?
Yes, it is. So if you have, at one time, when I first came into this field, conception was the fertilization that we're talking about. That was when, it was began and believed that life begins, although somewhere along the way, the argument came in, fertilization is not conception. Conception is implantation, which, again, it goes back to what the doctor said, is, once the egg and the sperm unite and start dividing, that is a life. So with contraception, there are several methods of contraception out there that if you read the insert, or even if you have a discussion with your physician, unless you know to ask the question, is, it may say that it prevents conception. Well, that depends on whose definition of conception. It could be that it prevents conception as defined by implantation. That's known in this field and in this arena as an abortifacient. It's not necessarily recognized as that term in the medical field, but what it is there a possibility that a fertilized egg can be flushed through the system because of this birth control method? And if that's the case, then yes, it's the same. It's just, as he said, it hasn't had time to implant into the wall of the uterus, but it's nevertheless less. And so that's a very important question, and that's one of the things that we educate, girls on is, look, it sounds harsh, but you could be flushing your offspring, unless you know to ask the question of what is conception to you, physician, and what does that mean? So.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we will do probably one more pre-scripted question, and then I'll open up the floor. All right, oftentimes in popular culture and the media, it appears that the pro-life position is mostly a religious position. It's mostly religious people out there outside the abortion facilities and so on pushing the pro-life position. But is that necessarily the case? Is pro-life only a religious position, and so by trying to convince others to be pro-life, we're pushing our religion? Or is it a broader position that encompasses all human rights, so it applies to all human beings? And first one to hit the desk gets to answer. All right, thank you, Father Verrill.
So I think we need to remember that God gave us an intellect for a reason. He didn't give us our intellect in vain. So we have a responsibility to think about issues of morality without necessarily always appealing to our faith. And so we should be able to defend the right to life of every human being right from conception. And I think you could have we need to think about who you're arguing with, what their premises are, because depending on who you're arguing with, is going to affect what kind of arguments that you're going to use. So with an atheist, you'd use different arguments than the kind of arguments that you're using with a Christian, because there are many Christians who do think that women should have a right to abort her baby. But I think with that someone who's not a Christian, we could just take the argument like that, just say that at one point in their life they were a single-celled embryo. I mean, they were never a sperm cell, they were never an unfertilized egg, but they were at one point in their life a single-celled embryo. And just from a matter of justice, is it okay to deny something to someone that you wouldn't want denied to yourself? So I think you can make that kind of argument. And of course, there are lots of comebacks on that. The people might deny that. No, say I was never a single-celled embryo, but these are issues which you can get further into and make good philosophical arguments for why that we should believe that. So.
All right, thank you very much, Father Verrill. Okay, Anya, go ahead.
Hi, I had something to add. Like, why are there reasons other than religious reasons for being pro-life? And yes, I think my whole life I've always been concerned about helping women. When I was in the oil business, I set up the Society of Petroleum Engineers 3% Club, because that's how many women there are in petroleum engineering. And a lot of why I got into 40 Days for Life and into pro-life is that I was pro-abortion when I was in college, and what I saw 15, 20 years later is that doesn't work out so well for women, and abortion hurts women. And it's not said enough in the culture that the women going into an abortion clinic, there are going to be consequences, and people are not telling you that. And I hear more and more and more, I hear the huge link between abortion and the rampant alcoholism and drug addiction in our culture, and not just for women, but for men too. And 80% of African American men in prisons are post-abortive, and no one is talking about it, and no one is acknowledging it. And so if it's such a good idea, why is it causing this huge rift in our culture? No one talks about the link between abortion and breast cancer. Everybody knows breast cancer is on the rise. I mean, everyone knows someone who has breast cancer. Breast cancer is on the rise for a reason. It's contraceptive pill and it's abortion. When you have an abortion, you increase your chance for breast cancer. And people don't know that. When you have an abortion, your suicide rate's going to go up. Your depression rate is going up. It is not a good idea. And so that's a lot of why I'm pro-life. And that's a lot of why I stand outside Planned Parenthood and try and talk to women and say, don't do this because you're scared, because that's a lot of why people are doing it, because the repercussions down the road for you and for the guy are incredible. And no one is even beginning to talk about post-abortive syndrome for guys, but it's out there. And we have to, as a culture, start talking about that. We have to, as a culture, say this room, because of abortion, is not full. That's how many people we're missing.
Right.
That's my reason. I mean, I'm pro-life now for religious reasons, but I came to it because I saw what it's like on the ground.
Yeah, I'm similar in that regard. I'm Catholic, but I'm not pro-life because I'm Catholic. I'm pro-life because, I see the impact of it, and also all the pro-choice arguments are really bad, but don't quote me on that. Let's see. All right, so that was a very good summary of there is non-religious reasons to be pro-life. And Ms. McGregor was telling me earlier that there's actually a large number of non-religious pro-life groups. Like there's LGBT for life, there's atheists for life, and there are a couple other groups too.
Agnostics for life, libertarians for life. I don't even know what confucianism is. I am clearly the dumbest one on this panel, but you heard all the accolades. But anyway, there are several. You can just Google those. But for the most part, it all comes down to humanity. And I mean, even in all of those, it comes down to, but no one has the right to take the life of another human being. And so, you know, I mean, you take the religious completely out of it. It's the personhood that still remains.
Yeah, and the numbers are huge. Like around the entire world, there are about 45 million abortions every year. So in the space of about 5 to 6 years, we abort the entire U.S. population around the world. All right. I will now open the floor up for people who want to come up and ask a question.
Walk up there?
Yeah. Oh, I can walk. Well, I can't walk that far to you because I'm tethered. So state your name briefly and then question.
So, yeah, I'm Julia Hayduck. I'm one of the faculty advisors for Bears for Life. So obviously I'm sympathetic. I'm curious as to what the sort of official position of the pro-life movement is on whether terminating an ectopic pregnancy is considered in any way an abortion, or is that simply a species of miscarriage?
I can tell you how we handle it in the pregnancy center world. When a woman comes in and, you know, when she has a positive pregnancy test and we do an ultrasound and we don't see a pregnancy in the uterus, then we know, okay, you know, her hormone levels are there, but we don't see one, so we send her to a physician. But you know, when we counsel with her, and if it is an ectopic pregnancy, we explain to her we are pro-life. We're a pro-life agency. We're also pro-life of the mother. So this is a pregnancy that if her doctor determines that is going to kill her, that is when you hear of the life of the mother, then if those pregnancies were allowed to continue, then they could rupture and she actually could lose her life. So it's up to her physician to decide, okay, is an ectopic pregnancy, is it going to kill her? And if in that situation where it is going to kill the mother, then that's one of those things where we don't advise her what to do, but we certainly explain to her your life has value as well. And so what your physician decides to do as far as which life he's going to save, that's going to be up to the physician. So that's how we explain that it is a life, but at that point, an ectopic pregnancy cannot survive for 9 months in the fallopian tube. So it's not our, you know, she has to decide which does she want to do. Does she want to preserve her own life or the life of the baby to the extent that the pregnancy continues and she ends up in the hospital and it ruptures?
Would any physician ever say, no, you...
I can't imagine that they would, but here's the thing. We don't make that judgment call to her to tell. We don't change the truth. I mean, what you can't do is change the truth. The truth is it is very much a life. And it's one of those things where we don't want her to come back and think that, but if the physician, you know, says this is going to kill you, and so you neither one are going to survive, then that's one of the things that as a woman, she may be able to reconcile that if it comes down to one of our lives and we're both going to die, if the physician doesn't intervene, then that's a choice that's, you know, she can understand at that point. So.
And one further addition to that, I've also been doing research on this, and it turns out that also not all ectopic pregnancies will end up endangering the mother's life, surprisingly, which I wouldn't have expected. And they can also transplant the baby, so it's also not a really clear-cut issue all the time. But yeah, in the case where both the baby's life and the mother's life are threatened, and if the mother continues, then both die, then in moral philosophy you have like a secondary side effect, which is the abortion. You're not directly doing the abortion, so that in that case you are not directly carrying out an abortion for the sake of having an abortion. All right, any other question askers? All right, while we wait for more questions from the floor, I have a couple here. Okay, here's a very common question. So how do you respond to the common assertion that a woman has a right to control her own body? You often hear, my body, my choice. Go for it, Anya.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is a common question, and one great way of dealing with it is to use like an analogy. So I'm going to borrow an analogy from a speaker that I've heard, and he said that if a woman has the right to control her own. So if we all in this room, like I guess we've been talking about how it's a person, but if we say just so if a woman has the right to control her body, what is the difference between an abortion and then going to an incubator and taking out a preemie baby, 22, 24 weeks, and putting it back in the woman's body and then killing it? I mean, if you say that it's okay to take life through an abortion at 22 or 4 weeks when it's in the womb, why is it not okay to take a baby out of an incubator and kill it? It's not consistent. So that was just one analogy that helped me. So.
All right, Dr. Pruss. You also have a mic next to you.
So I learned recently from one of our grad students who's actually sitting in the back that biologists think of the inside and outside of an organism somewhat differently from ordinary people. So we think of like things in our mouths and in our stomachs as our inside. Biologists don't. They think of it as our outside. Why? Because it's the external environment. I mean, think of our mouth, right? What's in there? There's air. It's not us. And this continues on down through the tubes and into the digestive system. That is actually our outside. So I think you might actually make a case that from a biological point of view, the fetus is not actually inside.
All right. Thank you. And one thought I've had on this issue is that if it's a woman's body and therefore her choice, is that still the same if she's inside the womb when she was a fetus? Does she still have bodily autonomy? So you can't kill her when she's in the womb either. All right. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. Here's a more charged question. My 13-year-old daughter was gang raped and became pregnant. Who are you to tell her not to have an abortion so she can put this terror in life behind her and get on with her innocent teenage life? Go for it, Anya.
I'll take this one because I knew this one was coming because it always does. And so I would like to offer just a few perspectives from the fact that a lot of times people who ask that actually don't know anyone who's been through that situation. What happens if someone gets pregnant through rape and what happens if someone gets pregnant through incest? And it does happen. I mean, these are the hard questions. And I have over the years met people in both those situations. And when you talk to women about how does one move through that, and heal from that, what blew me away is that in the end, it's actually, in a strange way, this is what they say, it's harder to get over the abortion because a woman took the life of her child than it was to get over the attack that came from someone external who was evil and crazy. And this is why every year in Walk for Life in DC, I don't know if you know, there's a big Walk for Life in Washington, DC every year, 800,000 people. It never really is shown on the news. There's always a group in there of like rape survivors who were forced to have an abortion because everyone around them thought that was the best thing for them. And they're starting to come out and say, it wasn't. And it was harder to heal from than the actual rape or the incest. And so anyone who says that you need to actually go and talk to people who have been through that and ask them because you talk to people who've had the baby and talk to people who hadn't. And it seems to me over and over again, the people who had the baby do better in the long run. And then on top of that, there are a lot of people out there who are children who were conceived in rape. I think Ryan Bloomberg is one of them, and they're coming forward. And when we push people and say, oh my gosh, like abortion is the way to heal, we also deny them life. And that's not fair in them because they are the innocent victim then of the rapist. So the rapist gets the woman and then the rapist gets the child as well. And so that's just experiences from real life on the ground, not something theoretical, but that was actually, I'm so glad you asked that question, and that's mostly the one I wanted to answer this evening. I think, Deborah, did you want to say something?
I think that was it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. That's an excellent answer, Anya.
This is something that comes up in the pregnancy center world, and I mean, because sometimes it's not always a scenario like that, but with date rape, and especially in a college town that happens, and so we have dealt with that in the pregnancy center world, and so what we have seen and experienced firsthand is the rape. By the time they come in, by the time they learn that they're pregnant, it's done. We cannot undo that. But the guilt compounds the trauma. And so what happens is you have the fact that a woman was raped, and then you have the compounded trauma of the abortion. So you have shame and guilt, compounding. And so that's just the lie. And, we have never, since I've been there in 11 years, I've never once heard a mother or a grandmother say they regretted a baby that was born in those circumstances or any. But we've seen countless women say they regretted their abortion. And, when you think about it, when you think of the lie of, well, I'll just kill it. If I'm pregnant, I'll just kill it. But that is the same kind of violence that's pushed on a woman when she's raped. It's violence. And so, although we may justify it in the, when a woman's dealing with it alone, those are the things that women have told me, that they begin to come back and feel like, I'm no better than that. I mean, look what I did. And so then they live with that from then on. So.
Yeah, I've known a few people who are post-abortive, and it stays with them for the rest of their lives. I know one guy who thinks about the son he could have had every single day. So, yeah, it's a very tragic thing. Also, another kind of practical point is abortion makes it much easier for the true criminal to get away with their crime. I've seen one stat that since the legalization of abortion, the domestic violence rate has skyrocketed.
Just wanted to add to that. Oftentimes in incest cases, they're very hard to bring to court and prove, because how do you put like an 11-year-old girl on the stand? And unless the guy is confessed, it's very hard to prosecute. But one way that you can guarantee a prosecution even years down the line is that if there was a baby and the baby was DNA tested. And I actually know of a case where they got prosecuted 40 years later, finally. So so a lot of times people who push abortion are like pedophiles and pimps. Like being practical, they are really happy with that because it removes all consequences, and then it really cuts down in prosecution rates. So.
Yeah, I've seen guys post that kind of comment online. They're like, yeah, we're totally for abortion because then we can have consequence-free sex. All right. Okay, we got a question from the floor. Come on up, sir.
So say that a woman decides not to have an abortion because it is wrong. What's the best way that woman can try to reconcile what happened and kind of realizing that something very bad happened to her, and basically acknowledging that there's evil in the world, and how do you come back from that? What's the bringing God back into the equation? How can we heal, essentially, and feel loved once again?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I don't want. Man, that's support. I mean, that's when you have a community, and hopefully you have a community like a CareNet or somewhere where they just the thing is, there are agencies like CareNet in this community that were created for that girl. I mean, there's nothing more wonderful to sit down and say, I'll make myself cry, but to sit down and say, I have good news. We were created for you. We were created for you 30 years ago. We've been waiting for you. And, we're going to get through this, and you're going to be okay, and we're going to be here every day. So that's the kind of thing that, because she's going to deal with it, or he, not him in that situation, but, she's going to deal with it. And so you just love. I mean, you have that, they experience God's love through you, and it's genuine and it's real. And so, sounds like the church answer, but I'm like, there are people that are created just for that situation.
Very beautiful. Thank you. All right, we have another question asker coming down. Come on.
So there are people in the world who are going to die because I am not giving them one of my kidneys. And I wonder, it seems like I'm not morally obligated to give them my extra kidney, or the one that I don't need to survive. And it would certainly be weird if I were legally obligated to give them my kidneys. And likewise, I might have neighbors who could use a lot of financial support that I can't give them unless I impoverish my children or put my children at a very serious risk for serious harm, maybe because of how poor I already am. But even so, it seems that I'm not morally obligated to make those kinds of sacrifices to help other people, to help the other people who I could benefit. So what do you think the difference is between the obligation to continue a pregnancy? What's the difference between that obligation or that situation, and then the situation of other people's lives depending on my kidney that I haven't given them, and I'm not planning to give them either?
Thank you. That's a very good question. All right. Okay, Dr. Pruss, you're up.
Yeah, two thoughts. The first is that it seems to make a big difference that this is one's own child, and obligations to one's own child are more onerous. I mean, if one cannot abandon one of one's children to die if that to keep one's other children out of poverty, say. So I think that's going to be one crucial difference, is that we have very different obligations towards our children, and extremely onerous ones towards our children. The second thought is that there's this distinction in medical ethics between ordinary and extraordinary care. And the thought is there are some things like giving food to a patient that are ordinary care. If you stop feeding a patient, you're killing the patient. Now, I suppose you could have a case where you have no food to give to a patient. Then you're not killing them by stopping feeding them, because you can't feed them possibly. But if you have food, you need to give it. And it seems like the reason feeding is a form of ordinary care is that's what's ordinarily needed for human survival. Well, being in a womb is what's ordinarily needed for human survival over the first 9 months. And so it seems like just as we need to feed others, we need to do this. And yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Pruss. Yeah, it's a very good point. One other argument I've heard along this line is, who are those organs for? Like, obviously your kidney is for you, but the womb, the woman does not derive a personal benefit from the womb. The womb's only purpose is for the child. So, as you were saying, it's unjust to be forced to give your kidney to someone else. The womb is actually meant for someone else.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
So part of the question mentioned legal things and legal obligations. So we don't. So there's something about the giving a kidney, so you're losing a part of yourself. That seems different from the case of pregnancy, but perhaps something that is a little closer to the case of pregnancy is the military draft. When the country is in grave danger of being overrun by invaders, it seems a country has every right to call on people to take up arms to defend the country against those invaders at the cost of many of their lives.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Dr. Pruss. Thank you. And Anya, go for it.
Yeah, hi. That was a very good question, and brave and well thought out. So the thing I thought of is that there's a difference between like giving help, whether it's a kidney or money, to someone, and because that's just help. And the difference is that when abortion's involved, you're taking a life, and that is that's just a very different question. Like, would you go and kill that neighbor's kid because then they would have more money? Because that's the closer analogy.
Just one more thing. In America, anyway, we have we're guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, you don't need that kidney right now, but that doesn't mean you're not ever going to. So, as far as in America, because of the constitutional values of our country, then that's why you would be required, if we followed that, to provide life, to give life to a child versus to potentially take a life in the event that you needed that kidney. So it's in America, it's because of the Constitution as well.
Yeah, right. You can't take the kid out of the womb without killing it. So, all right. Thank you very much. It looks like we have another question. Yes, come forward, ma'am.
It's just a quick question. I haven't researched it, and maybe it's an easy answer. But when they say abortions, I think you said 45 million abortions. Does that mean the act of cutting the baby out, or does that mean how many babies are coming out? Like, oh, she had twins, but that's an abortion, or is it, oh, that was 2 abortions right there?
I haven't researched it either, but I would, and actually the number is like 51 or 2 million now, is an abortion, which is a procedure, and not the number of babies.
Yeah, I'm sure the number is much higher because that doesn't take into account other forms of abortion like chemical abortions and so on.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. Come on up.
Yes, I just wanted to seek clarification to one of the answers given for the argument about it's my body, my choice. There was an analogy given where you wouldn't smash a baby in the ICU. I didn't quite understand that. Based on my understanding, the thing about a pregnancy is a pregnancy affects a woman's body. It puts her in certain health risks, and ultimately she's the one responsible to, she has to change her diet and all that stuff to make sure the baby goes through, succeeds in the pregnancy. While in ICU, the child is physically detached from the mother and is no longer a risk to her health. So I just wanted to get clarification on that.
All right, thank you, sir. For it.
Yes, that's one for me. I think the person I heard give that analogy, the speaker, was saying that if it's a woman's choice to whether to end the pregnancy or not, that so an abortion ends the pregnancy, and then. But if the woman had the same baby as a preemie and had it in the ICU, the question the speaker was asking was, how would you feel about someone who went in and killed the baby in the ICU, because it's the same age of baby, and also, obviously, if they kill the baby in the ICU, that would be murder, but if all a woman would have to, just, theoretically, all a woman would have to do is take a baby from an ICU and put it back in the womb, and then it wouldn't be murder anymore. And so it's like a same age baby, but we see it one way as murder, but once it goes into the abortion debate, we get okay with it. Like, why is it okay when it's in the womb, and we're told we would not be okay with it when it was in the ICU? It was a way to ask people, it's like, why are we looking at it one way, and why are we not consistent? Does that help?
I think so.
Yeah, I hope so. We can talk more afterwards. Yeah.
Yes, and after this event, the panelists will not be disappearing. They'll be staying here as long as you have more follow-up questions. I think I saw a couple hands go up. Yeah. Any new people before I have returns? Oh, okay.
There.
Got someone all the way at the back.
Long walk down.
Yeah. We could say bad things about him as he walks up here. Look at that vest.
Is that okay?
Look at that vest.
Oh, thank you. So I had a question about a phraseology that's commonly used in the pro-life movement, and that's that the unborn have a right to life. I think in the Christian community, that's really easy to justify because we can say that people are made in the image of God, and for that reason, they have rights as persons. But when you're out in the community talking to people, they don't necessarily share the same faith that you do. So how do we go about having the conversation about the right to life with somebody when they may not believe, they may not be a Christian, they may not even be a theist? So I was curious what you guys think as far as how do you have that specific conversation?
Yes, Dr. Pruss.
So some years ago, a number of philosophers did a study of people in Nazi-occupied countries and Germany during World War II who hid Jews. And what they wanted to do is figure out why people were doing this. And so they inquired into the religious views of the people who were doing this, into their moral upbringing, and they basically found nothing in common. Some were religious, some were not. Some had strict moral upbringing, some did not. Here's the one thing, but when they interviewed the people, they found there's one thing all of these people said at some point. They said something like, we're all human beings. And so they felt, this is a human being, I need to protect this human being. I think some of them may even have been anti-Semites, but they still felt, these are still human beings, we cannot kill them. And I think it's this is basis of common humanity that we all recognize, or we all are capable of recognizing, that need not be at all religious.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And historically, it's very interesting that once slavery was outlawed in the United States, abortion also was subsequently outlawed in almost every state. That's surprising to most people. Abortion used to be illegal in pretty much everywhere in the United States. And it was largely because of this. They realized, yes, if just because someone's skin color is different, that doesn't make them non-human. That also means that someone who hasn't been born yet, that doesn't make them non-human either.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, we wait for more questions from the floor. Here's another card question. This one is more of what next sort of question. So how do we talk to churches about raising awareness and support for the pro-life cause, even when some members of the church may be pro-choice? Scripture references appreciated. All right, Father Robert.
Yes. Because I think although there is a place for arguments that are just based on pure on reason, I think we have a lot of resources in Scripture and in theology to help people see things which maybe they don't see just by general arguments. You think, like, for example, some people say, how can you judge, somebody, that you don't know what it's like to be pregnant, and, their difficult situations. And I think, one person who knew how difficult it was to be a teenage pregnant mother was the Blessed Virgin Mary. And I think any kind of argument, any person who seems to think that it would have been okay for the Blessed Virgin Mary to have an abortion, that it just seems just completely outrageous. So so there's examples like that, and there's so many places in the Bible which talks about the humanity of the unborn child. There's talk about how Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. So that indicates that just as a tiny little cell, God knew that child. So there's lots of examples like that throughout the Bible. I think also for Catholics, I think we can also draw on the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. So this is the doctrine that Our Lady was conceived without original sin, and the fact is that we celebrate this feast on the 8th of December, which is exactly 9 months before we celebrate her birthday. And so if people have kind of philosophical objections saying it cannot possibly be true that a single-celled embryo could be a human person, then really they are denying the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, that it's inconceivable that Mary could be conceived without original sin, because only a person is the kind of being that can either have sin or not have sin. So I think that something like the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception really should help Catholics to see the dignity of every human person, even if they find it hard to understand some of the arguments that people put forth without appealing to doctrines of the faith.
Thank you. Very good. So what would that say about, say, like, we have lots of... Hello? Hello? Okay. We have lots of politicians in this country who claim to be Catholic, but are also pro-choice. Are they merely in some kind of moral error, or is it a much deeper problem for them?
Yeah, well, I think it is a very deep problem, because they are, explicitly denying principles which we are, we are called to hold in faith. So it is, in the actual document, the Solemn Declaration of the Immaculate Conception that was declared by Pope Pius IX in 1854. He speaks about how the shipwreck of faith that is that results if people who deny the doctrine of Immaculate Conception. And in this document, the Pope is very explicit about making criticizing those theories such as like delayed hominization, which was a medieval theory which said that the installment took place like between some like 40 and 60 days after the initial conception. And this document explicitly condemns those who make this distinction between first and second conception.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting, because I know at least Nancy Pelosi, she explicitly relies on that doctrine to justify her pro-choice position. So I guess she's a heretic. All right. Yes, sir.
So I asked this in part because I know one of you thinks the answer to this question is no. Does the state have an absolute moral obligation to criminalize abortion? That is, if it turns out the state permits some abortions, is the state doing something that's intrinsically evil?
Who's he thinks?
All right. Looks like you got the...
Who is it he thinks he's got the right answer? So is the state doing something evil for... Intrinsically evil.
If they permit abortion.
If they permit abortion.
Because look, the state permits things that let people die all the time.
Well, here's the deal. The state criminalizes the murder of a child in the womb unless it's at the hands of the mother and her doctor.
That's right.
So they already have. They've already said that it's a crime. The state has already said that it is murder. But what the state, the state is, where that's concerned, the legislators that passed the law, actually that's what the state, that's who did it, is that it's hypocritical. It changes, that's what I was talking about earlier about when you change what truth is. If truth is that that's the death of a human being, it just depends on whether or not it's at the hands of the mother and her physician under her direction. But if it's her boyfriend who says, I don't want to do this, then it's murder. Then, what do you think? Is it right, depending on who deals the final blow? We're probably not supposed to get in debate. We'll talk later. Anybody else?
I think maybe, I wonder if you're asking, what about the situations where a mother's life is in danger, and is abortion okay then, or is it criminal? Was that it?
This general point. For example, if here's something the state does that results in people dying, it permits people to drink alcohol. That results in people dying, a lot of people every year. There are people who would be alive today if prohibition were the law. But we think it's okay for the state to not have prohibition. And I'm wondering if pro-life laws are like that. Is it something where the state should, is it something where the state can look at it and make a prudential decision about whether they're going to save people's lives or not? Or is it the sort of thing where the state has an absolute obligation to have laws on the books that say you can't do this?
So I think when we're talking about degrees, like what's the duty? What's the degree of the state's duty? And yeah, you could go down to the minute all the way to the grand, but the state, who is made up of the legislators, made up of the districts of the people that they represent, have to decide and have decided what is the greater burden.
Yeah.
And so should the state, if the state has the duty and it's the burden on the people that it represents, then absolute, they have a duty, they have that obligation. But do they have the duty, for example, you take a baby out of the womb at 20 weeks, it's going to die. Not everyone that drinks alcohol is going to die. I mean, so that's it's kind of like, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but when it comes down to the ability to enforce that, and then to also, I think the degree of duty is greater when it's absolute certainty, take that baby out, it's going to die, versus if you take a drink of alcohol, maybe or maybe not. So if we had the ability, then yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I don't think on the state that they don't have that great a duty as a body.
Yeah, and I think the state does have a responsibility to protect its citizens, especially the most vulnerable members of their society. And in people who are, drinking alcohol to excess, they're actually, harming themselves. And there's a question of prudence, to what extent we should stop people from harming themselves. So we would, like we do, stop people from, we legalize certain drugs, but there's a kind of prudential decision where you have to decide, is this going to be against the common good, so that we don't sort of everything that is immoral, we don't kind of necessarily make that have a law against that. But I think when it comes to defending innocent life, then it is responsibility of the state to expect to defend every human life. Well, I think if there's just like if there's a group of people who are being persecuted in your society, and you do nothing to defend them, then I think that and it's your I think it is the responsibility of government to care for its citizens. So I'd say.
Yeah, one further point I'd add is that in America, the Constitution guarantees like the right to life, liberty, and happiness. And the core right there is the right to life. You don't have any other right if you don't have the right to life. And that's the bedrock of all our other laws. So once you stop enforcing that very protection of that very crucial fundamental right, then that pretty much undermines everything else. So I would say, yes, the government's intrinsically evil if it doesn't outlaw abortion. We have a new person back there, so go with the new person. Yes, and I asked the panelist to repeat his question once he says it.
I'll sort of point this at one person, an Irish lady, I believe. I'm not sure if Ireland has voted or not yet on the allowing abortion to be legalized. I understand that people believe that they will pass an abortion law. How is this possible? I've been in Ireland a number of times, how they resisted the Crown and how they resisted Anglicanism, etc. How could that possibly be in Ireland unless it's gone the way of the rest of Europe?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So just to summarize the question is, I guess, there's Ireland is in the process of having a vote on their constitution about changing the abortion laws. And your question was, why do you think that is possible in Ireland? I hope I've captured that. Yes, Ireland the vote hasn't happened yet. I believe it's going to be in the spring. It's Proposition 8. Under Irish Constitution, you can change the Constitution in Ireland if a certain percentage of the population vote in a referendum to change the Constitution. And so, yeah, that is ongoing in Ireland right now. And oh my gosh, Ireland is like probably the most pro-life Western country. And what I want to say to people is that Ireland also has the best maternity health rates and the best mortality rates for mothers of pretty much any Western country, and I believe it exceeds America. And what people there was some abortion law brought into Ireland in 2013, and the ironic thing is that it was brought in on the back of like a maternal death case that became very well known. So then it was brought in a small way, and so now they're undergoing a referendum to bring in abortion in a greater way. And the other thing that's worth pointing out is that a lot of the funding for the pro-choice movement or the pro-abortion movement in Ireland is actually coming from some rich American millionaires. So I don't know if people know that. So it's pretty interesting. We're going to see how it plays out, but it's often cited that, abortion is better for women's health, but the truth is that when abortion comes into a country, the maternal death rates actually they don't get better. So how can it happen? I guess it's the Western world has become secularized, and we've all kind of bought the eugenics myth, that taking life and is better for the population in general. And I know I bought it too when I was 20 and in college. It all sounds so good. It's like a lot of things. It sounds really good at the time, and then 20 years later you're like, no, that was so not a good idea. So I think that's what's happening. Ireland is having the same challenges as the rest of the world, and so, but we'll see how it all turns out. When I was in college, they had a referendum to bring abortion into Ireland, and it was defeated. So,
all right, yeah, we'll be praying that it is defeated again. All right, we are growing very short on time. I think we have time for one more question. So who's going to be the lucky person? Oh, she got up first. Sorry.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure what Baylor's actual policy is, but when I was a student over a decade ago, there were like punitive policies towards unmarried pregnant women. Do they still have those? Does anybody know?
You mean as far as do you get kicked out if you're pregnant? Mm-hmm. No. If they ever had them, now that is very much the rumor. We hear that all the time still in the pregnancy center, but no, there is no policy that they can't go to school here, that they get kicked out. I mean, they're very supportive. It's just the rumor has been around forever.
Okay, I do have another question too. Mm-hmm. Just in a town like Waco, there's like a ton of churches, a ton of religious people, which is amazing. But there's also, I think, a lot of religiosity and a lot of shame that surrounds the issue of unwed pregnancies. And I just wondered how you would address churches and people within churches who might respond with judgment without thinking about how that might be pushing people towards abortion. What would you want people to learn within Christian communities as far as how to handle the issue better?
Thank you. Excellent question.
I feel like I'm hogging the mic, y'all. Y'all want this? Well, I mean, okay, a couple things. We do see a lot of women, probably 75 or 79, I think, % was the last time that, and we see, 3,000 a year. So we do see a lot. And I get this question a lot of times, from, well, what about they're having premarital sex and all of the church answer. And I mean, I can't remember I don't know where you went. Where'd you go?
No, I'm back here.
Oh, okay. what did you call it? Religiosity. I call it Christianese. I mean, whatever. It's the. Yeah, I get that. But one thing is, the exciting thing is, God created a life to save our life, and so if He wants to create a life in the womb of a woman, that's it. That's up to Him. And so it comes down to God's sovereignty as Christian. Now, if I'm talking to another Christian, it's like, okay, did God make a mistake? Only God could have placed that life there. Mm-hmm. So if He created it and put it there, who are we to decide whether or not that was a good idea? We don't know why He allowed that to happen, but He did. And so for the church, they have a duty to protect that, because it's God's sovereignty. At the end of the day, it's because God said it and we should defend it.
Yeah, very good answer. Yes, Father Robert.
I could add that in the church, there's so many examples in the scriptures on how we are not to be judgmental of others. There's the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector. The Pharisee prays, "I thank you, Lord, that I am virtuous and I give lots of money to the temple taxes, and I'm not like this wretched tax payer, this tax person." The tax collector, he doesn't raise his head towards the heavens and just beats his chest and says, "Have mercy on me, a sinner." And Jesus commends the tax collector for his humility. And so as Christians, we have to be like the tax collector, acknowledge that we're all sinners, and not be like the judgmental Pharisee. So we are all in need of God's mercy, and so we need to create an environment where no one should be feel that they cannot come to receive God's mercy and forgiveness.
Thank you. Yeah, very good answers. And why is it better to push a woman to not only be pregnant out of wedlock, but also a murderer? That doesn't seem like a good way to go. All right. So, I'll give you, sir, come on up. I'll give you a chance to ask your question.
Okay, my question is, why, whoever wants to answer, why is adoption not at the forefront of the argument for a woman and for a third party, whether a boyfriend or a parent? It's always the option of to keep the life or to end the life, but there's no option to give the life. My mom owns and runs an adoption agency in the DFW area, and she's been running it for a dozen years. She's always had 10, 15 women that want to give a baby, and she's always 100 plus couples that are desiring a baby.
Thank you. That's a very good point.
Well, I've done the studies. I've looked at the studies, the adoption statistics, and in the state of Texas, there are 67 abortions to every one adoption. So, the struggle is real. The struggle is what we have observed is the culture around adoption for the birth mother is terrible. The judgment is terrible. Women pick abortions. They do it in secret for a reason, because they don't want the judgment. With adoption, it's out there. Everyone knows. And then she comes home and she doesn't have the baby. So the culture for the birth moms is terrible. They can't withstand it from their family, from their friends. How could you give away your baby? That's not what happened. That's not the way it is, but that's what they hear. And so the culture around adoption has got to change. So one of the things that we are doing is we have classes on adoption, as in we just kind of sneak, just look, this is not for you, but in case you know someone, trying to change the culture around it being a heroic choice for the mother. But even though we can say all day long it's a heroic choice for the mother, she doesn't experience life as a hero. And so until that's changed, that statistic is not going to change. And so it takes all of us to really, before it happens, you can't wait till someone's pregnant and then say, "Oh, you're going to be a hero." No, they already know what's going to happen. We have to change the culture before the pregnancy in order for that to be the case. And so we have a lot of work to do.
Right, yeah. Abortion is a much bigger issue than just saying the individual woman who had the abortion, placing the blame entirely on her. Because it doesn't take place in a vacuum. There's all the familial support, there's societal support, and so on. So it's more as a culture that everyone's funneling women towards abortion. All right, one more. Oh, we got a new person. Okay, come on.
That's wrong. It's a CareNet specific question.
Oh gosh.
Do y'all offer contraceptive services for the women that go through your program?
Okay, so we don't recommend, what our policy is, we don't recommend or refer for contraception, but we do discuss what the contraceptive methods are available. We've worked for a year with the health department to actually develop a discussion tool, because this is no judgment on physicians, but they don't have the time to go through what all's available and what is, as I said before, what is an abortifacient? What is, if a woman says, I'm going to have birth control, there's a very good possibility she's going to walk into a doctor's office and say, I want the Mirena, or I want the this, or I want the pill. She's not had any education on the side effects and whether or not it's an abortifacient or natural family planning, any of that. And so we educate our women, the women who come in who are not pregnant, who have a negative pregnancy test, and then also those who are pregnant but during their 6 weeks after postpartum, in that these are the contraceptive methods. If you are considering it, these are all of the methods and all of the things that you need to think about, and then you need to pick those things that are important to you, have that discussion with your doctor, and that includes abstinence and natural family planning. So those are on there as well.
One further, is your staff HIPAA qualified? Do they follow HIPAA guidelines?
Yes.
All right.
All right, thank you. With that, I'm going to have to close our question and answer session. This has been very good. I'm very happy with all the excellent questions everyone has brought up. Oh, wait, I have one more question. Nope.
I thought there was someone else that was competing with Shirley person.
Well, no, I'm going to have to shut it down. I'm going to be a bad guy now. Shut things down. Okay, and I'd like to close us in a word of prayer and then meeting adjourned. Father God, I thank you so much that, like Dr. Marks was saying, we have the freedom to have these kinds of discussions, because they're so important that we think through these issues before suddenly they get thrust in a person's face and they just get pushed into a decision that will impact the rest of their lives just out of fear. So Father God, I pray that we do take the initiative and work to change our culture at large, not just shove it off on someone else, but realize we have to make adoption a viable option and take away the shame and social stigma associated with just pregnancy out of wedlock. It's not a great thing, but we have to be supportive of people and help them come to a better situation. And we also realize that this is ultimately not a fight against flesh and blood, but against Satan and all his evil powers. So, Father God, we pray that you protect us and give us the weapons to fight against Satan and his ideology of death that he's sent among us. And we pray that you bless us all as we go forth and spread your gospel and the gospel of life. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.